Namaskar, friends. Today, in this series of Abhyasa and Vairagya, that is, practice and detachment series, will study the last verse about the Vairagya, that is, verse number 16 of chapter 1 Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And this is nothing but the higher form of the Vairagya. In previous video, we have discussed about the lower form of the Vairagya. Now let's see. See this particular verse says Tatparam purusakhyāterguṇavaitṛṣṇyam. That means Tatparam, that highest being, that superior, that supreme purusha, that is nothing but the pure consciousness. Khyate, that means through knowledge of that pure consciousness. Gunavaitrsnyam, that means these three elements like sattva, rajas and tamas. Vaitrishyam, state of freedom from desires or cravings can be achieved. That means what is the basic meaning of this verse? The meaning is that the highest form of the detachment, that is also called Paravairagya, in which there is freedom from the deep rooted desires for gunas on account of the knowledge of the purushas. That means by attaining the knowledge of that supreme consciousness, that is nothing but the purusha, there can be freedom from the desire for gunas. Okay, now let's understand this concept through the 25 elements from the Sankhya philosophy. So, what are these? These are nothing but five Jnanendriyas, five Karmendriyas, five Tanmatras, five Bhutas, and the Ahankara, that is ego, Buddhi, intelligence, Prakriti, unmanifest primordial, that is also called matter, and the Purusha, that is consciousness. See, lower form of the Vairagya was basically dealing with the sense objects. And what are these? These are basically nothing but our Jnanendriyas, Karmendriyas, the gross elements. The Paravairagya, the higher form of the Vairagya, is basically dealing with the freedom from the gunas. Gunas are nothing but these sattva, rajas, and tamas. Now let us understand in detail the difference between these two form of the detachment. See, Paravairagya involves not only giving up the enjoyments, but even the deep rooted taste for enjoyment can be removed. There is no desire for pleasure, enjoyment, knowledge, or even sleep. This happens when there is awareness of the real nature of Purusha, that we have just seen, that purusakhyāter, by the knowledge of the Purusha, then there is no desire for pleasure remains. Now, the aspirant basically overcomes all attractions and remains unshaken even when the pleasure of the world are offered to him. That means that in that particular stage, that Paravairagya state, direct intuitive cognition of Purusha, and this gives rise to Paravairagya. And there is one important aspect of this particular stage, that is, there is no return to the life of cravings and passion. Now let's see how it is differ from the lower form of the Vairagya. In lower form of the Vairagya, there was a possibility of going back from the lower Vairagya, back from the lower Vairagya. But there is no return to the life of the craving and passion in the Paravairagya. In the lower form of the Vairagya, the aspirant transcends the attachment for sense objects, but these still remain in a subtle form. Okay. Now it involves the process of suppression. That means you basically willingly try to control the development of the senses. or the vrittis, basically. So there is conscious control by the mind, and the desires and cravings are kept under control. That means whenever you try to control your senses by by conscious control, then there are higher possibility that you can go back from this particular stage. That means you can again and again fall into the pattern of these cravings, of the desires. But in the form of the Paravairagya, in this particular stage, there is no return to the lower senses. Okay. Now, how we can understand it again, that the Paravairagya state is basically dealing with the subtle elements like gunas. That means in particular stage we are talking about that there is a freedom from the subtle element also. But in the lower form of the Vairagya, we were talking about the freedom from the gross elements. Now, if we'll see, as per the Vijnana Bhikshu, it is said, it is called the highest dispassion by Patanjali because it is dispassion towards the most subtle aspect of matter, the very gunas themselves. That is called Paravairagya. That means Paravairagya state is dealing with the freedom from the subtle aspects of the matter, while the lower form of the Vairagya was dealing with the, whereas the renunciation in the previous sutra, that was basically about the lower form of the Vairagya, primarily refers to the gross aspects of the matter, the gunas as manifest in their most physical and solid product. That is nothing but the gross sense object. That means whenever there is a freedom from the gross object, that is basically called the lower form of the Vairagya. And whenever there is a freedom from the desire of the subtle element, then this particular stage is basically called the Paravairagya. That is the highest form of the Vairagya. Hope you have understood this particular concept of the Paravairagya. In the next video, we'll discuss about the types of Samadhi. Till then, stay tuned.